Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to talk about a totally different kind of war. One that wasn't fought on battlefields with guns and tanks, but in quiet rooms and, well, inside the brilliant minds of geniuses. It sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? But the answer connects two of the most important people of the 20th century. These were two men who were absolute game changers for the Allies in World War II, but in the process, they each took on a burden that would pretty much haunt them for the rest of their lives. We're diving deep into the hidden history of the war, a high-stakes battle of pure intellect that didn't just change the world, it completely reshaped it, leaving behind a legacy that's as complex as it is tragic. All right, so for our first story, I want you to picture this. We're not in some lab or government building. We're out in the treacherous, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean where a deadly game of cat and mouse was going on. And frankly, the Allies were getting crushed. This was the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest single campaign of the entire war. Germany's U-boats, they called them wolf packs, were just relentlessly hunting and sinking Allied supply ships with terrifying efficiency. And their secret weapon wasn't just torpedoes. It was an encryption device that made all of their communications completely invisible. And this was the Enigma machine. I mean, look at it. It might just look like a clunky old typewriter, right? But nope. This thing was a mechanical marvel of encryption, a true master of chaos, capable of turning any simple message into a completely indecipherable jumble of letters. So how in the world did this thing work? Well, an operator would press a key, let's say the letter A. That signal would zip through a series of spinning rotors, and each one would scramble the letter. Then it would hit a plug board for another layer of scrambling before a final, totally different letter lit up. The real genius, though, was that with every single key press, the rotors would click into a new position, so typing AAA could come out as something like QLZ. Now, what's really wild about this slide is just the sheer scale of the problem. When you crunch all the numbers, the rotor combinations, their starting positions, the plug board settings, you get this number, 150 million. It's not just a big number, it's a statistical nightmare. To try and wrap our heads around that, get this. It was estimated that a team of 10 people working 24/7 would need 20 million years to test every single combination. And here's the kicker. The Germans reset the entire machine to a new random setting every single day at midnight. So cracking it by hand wasn't just hard, it was mathematically impossible. So you can't fight a machine like that with traditional spies. You need a different kind of weapon, a different kind of brain. And boy, did the British find one in a brilliant, kind of eccentric mathematician named Alan Turing. See, while everyone else was trying to crack this thing with, pencil and paper, Turing was thinking way outside the box. He was already obsessed with this wild idea of a universal machine, basically a machine that could think. And he was absolutely convinced the only way you're going to beat a machine as complex as Enigma is with another machine. But even a super genius machine needs a place to start, right? And Turing and his team found this tiny little crack in the armor. And it wasn't in the machine itself. It was in the people using it. Turns out the Germans were creatures of habit. Every morning, like clockwork, they'd broadcast a routine weather report. And that predictable text gave the codebreakers a tiny foothold, a known piece of the puzzle to start with each day. So Turing designed and built this incredible machine. And you have to understand, this thing was basically the granddaddy of the modern computer. And it worked. It started churning through thousands of Enigma settings, looking for matches to those weather reports. Suddenly, the Allies could read Germany's most secret communications. This turned the tide of the entire Battle of the Atlantic, and some say shortened the war by years. But here's the heartbreaking part. Turing's incredible work remained a state secret for 50 years. So instead of being celebrated as a hero, he was persecuted by the very country he helped save. In 1952, he was arrested for being gay, which was illegal. He was given a horrible choice, prison or chemical castration. He chose the latter. Just 2 years later, he was found dead from cyanide poisoning, a half-eaten apple by his side. An absolute tragedy for a man who literally saved the world. Okay, let's switch gears to our second story. It starts with this monument in Hiroshima. And if you look closely, you'll see a pretty famous equation engraved on it. E equals mc squared. It almost seems to blame one man for the atomic bomb, Albert Einstein. So, how on earth did the world's most famous pacifist get tied to its most destructive weapon? Well, it all kicked off in 1938, right as the world was teetering on the edge of war. A couple of German chemists were messing around with uranium when they discovered something that just blew their minds. They had split the atom. They'd found a way to split a uranium atom into lighter elements, and in the process, they'd released a terrifying amount of energy. They had discovered nuclear fission. News of this discovery just ripped through the scientific world. And one guy, a Hungarian physicist named Leo Szilard, he immediately got it. He understood the horrifying potential. He realized that the splitting of atoms could create a chain reaction, unleashing an unimaginable amount of energy. An atomic bomb, a term he actually remembered from a science fiction novel. Kind of wild. So Szilard is, he's panicking. He's absolutely convinced that the German scientists who discovered this are already racing to build a bomb for Hitler. But who's going to listen to him? He was a refugee with zero political clout. He knew he had to warn the US government, but he needed a voice so famous, so respected that they couldn't possibly ignore it. And that's when he went to Albert Einstein. He laid it all out, the science, his fears. Einstein, who hadn't really considered the military side of his own theories, was stunned. So together, they wrote and signed a letter that went straight to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him that this unimaginably powerful weapon was now a very real possibility. And that one letter, man, it set off a chain reaction of its own. It didn't just help end the war, it kicked off the entire nuclear age. And it's a reality that would haunt both Einstein and Szilard for the rest of their days. Roosevelt got the letter, and he did not mess around. The result was the Manhattan Project, this massive, top-secret race to build an atomic bomb before the Germans could. And ironically, Einstein himself wasn't even involved. He was considered a security risk. But his letter, that was the spark that lit the whole fuse. As we all know now, Germany never actually built a bomb, but the United States did. And in August of 1945, those bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The result was about 200,000 people dead, and Japan's surrender. So the man who only wanted to warn the world about a potential Nazi threat was now forever linked to this unbelievable devastation. Even though he never touched the bomb's design, Einstein would later say that signing that letter was the one great mistake of his life. You can just feel the weight of that profound regret. So that brings us back to where we started, right? You've got two geniuses, two absolutely monumental contributions to the Allied victory, and two deeply personal, tragic stories about the consequences that came next. I mean, just look at this when you put them side by side. The parallels are pretty stunning. Turing's machine saves millions from tyranny, yet he was destroyed by the very society he helped save. Einstein's letter helps stop a potential Nazi bomb, but in doing so, it helps unleash a new kind of terror on the world that he would regret forever. Both men used their incredible intellect to win a war, but they both paid an immense personal price. Their stories really leave us with a difficult, echoing question. When the fate of the world is hanging in the balance, what is the moral duty of a genius? And what is the true cost of an idea? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.